Hello there, everyone. Welcome to this. It's morning, and I have coffee, and I'm gonna do something with my little 2D library. That's what's going on. So, let's see if I can run this. So, I have this. I have my old Snake game running here in this. You see, it sort of looks correct. Well, there's a white background on each tile. But it has a texture drawing, which is something we didn't have last time I did a live stream. I've added that off stream, so we're not gonna do all that work today. We're gonna fix it up because, as you can see, it's a bit little broken. We have a little to do here in the README. So this library is the API is based on Raylib, but I'm working on making it so that it does not. Like the initial implementation was a Raylib wrapper, but just the API is based on Raylib. So it sort of, wow. It sort of looks like this, you know, there's like draw texture and all these things. Very similar to Raylib still. It will, yeah, it will be a bit different over time, but yeah. And I'm gonna get a sweater. It's getting chilly in Sweden. It's August, and in August it's getting colder. It's getting colder. Well, let's see here. So we have this. I figured out why the background was white at the time. Oh yeah, I know why. There's a hack in. So we have the. I can show you what I did for the texture drawing. So I did that sort of off stream because I just felt like doing some programming. So this currently is DirectX 3D11, and it's just. I make things neat as I go, kinda. So, let's see here. So we have the draw texture, right? This is similar to in Raylib and draw texture direct, and then it's a draw texture EX, which is similar to draw texture Pro in Raylib. And then we have, if we change texture, then we draw the current batch. And this stuff is sort of, I looked at Raylib, what it does. This is essentially it. This is if there's no rotation, then it can use draw. Then it can use draw like the four corners as they are. But if it's rotated, then it needs to adjust the destination rect of where it's going. So we have the destination rect here, right? So this looks sort of like if you look at how 2D matrix looks, a matrix to rotation, matrix to rotate. We have 32, maybe this one. So if you look at how this thing looks, it's a cos and a sin, and then it uses C minus S S C. If you look at this, it's C minus S S C. So this is just these things here is for rotating the sort of destination rectangle, but you rotate. This is the top left corner, top right, bottom left, bottom right. You could achieve the same thing by doing like if you had like a matrix that was like what is it, linalg dot matrix 2. And then you said rot times math dot rad per degree. I'm not sure if the API should be in degrees or in rads, but yeah, we'll see. Coffee today, quite nice. If anyone using Mocha pots, it's important to have like a paper filter into the top so it gets less muddy. But you see, this kind of matrix here is sort of similar to this stuff, because yeah, like I said, and what this actually is just TL. If you think about it, it's just x is just vec2 x comma y plus and then matrix times, and then this is the top left corner, and then you just need to know like in which direction is it sort of what point does it rotate around, and that's the dx and dy here. So you have sort of a vec2 dx dy. I think this would do exactly, unless you rotate matrix to rotate. This would do exactly the same thing. Yeah, it still works in all directions. So that does exactly the same thing. It's just not. It's a bit more. It's not. I mean, this is probably slightly more efficient because you've typed out the exact math. But you could, like, do something like this. The position is vec2, and then origin is vec2, or we can call it dx maybe. This is the offset from based on the origin, px dx dl, and then you could just do like p plus m dot dx. Wait, oh yeah. No, wait. There is something wrong here. Oh yeah, it doesn't completely make sense, because for each of these you also have to add in the height. So for each of the you sort of, for the top left corner, of course, you're just respecting the offset, but for the other ones you also add in the height and the width of the whole rectangle. So you can sort of think of it as what you wrote. You have like a line, you have like a rectangle like this. Start up here. If you have no offset, then this is just at the origin. Then you have you can think of it as a vector from here to here, and you're sort of rotating this. Maybe like maybe your rectangle should be rotated like that. So then this line here you rotate so it goes up there, and then you can think of this line here that you rotated it down. So you rotate 4 separate lines, sort of, or 4 separate points really, around a common origin. That's what you're doing. But yeah, there is, you don't need to do that using you don't need to, like, some people would be like, oh, it's nicer to do this using these matrices. But yeah, this is, when you look at this is just a matrix multiplication with a vector and this sort of rotation matrix. So it just rotates some lines. Anyways, so that sort of I looked at Rayleigh a bit for that, but yeah, we could just use this also. Doesn't really matter. Then I draw the vertices for the batch, and here I have I have to add some stuff to my vertex buffers, right? So I have like a position UV and a color, and the vertex then it has a position UV and a color, and then I've had to update the input. It's quite easy to add these things. Like, then you have to update the input layout, whatever that is. Here, you have to say like, okay, what are the things in the input? You have a position UV and a color, and then in the shader, and here is where this little hack is to do this hack, blah blah. But here you just pass on the UV, which is the texture lookup, the coordinates for the texture lookup, and stuff. I think so. There are some things here that are not done yet. For example, it uses the whole rectangle. It needs to calculate based on the SRC rect here. It needs to calculate the part of the texture it should use. SRC rect is in pixel coordinates, and the UV is sort of a normalized coordinates between 0 and 1. So it needs to divide the pixel coordinates by the width and height of the thing to get to the 0 to 1 space. So that's some different things we're gonna look at. Maybe let's start with should we maybe start with this? Do we have here this width and the height? I believe we do, yes. I know you tried Jaya a while back. What was your impression? Impression is that it works, it's okay. It's less polished than Odin and doesn't contain anything I need that Odin doesn't have. Maybe the package system is a bit different. Maybe it would be beneficial sometimes. Maybe it would be bad sometimes. I don't need the meta programming. So there's really nothing in it that I need. I realized that's what my that's why I haven't done anything more, because I was like, yeah. But maybe I'll get back to it. Maybe I'll suddenly realize I want the meta programming, or I want for those. I want those that different package system. We'll see. SRC. So, how do we do this in a nice way? How do we do this in a nice way? I'm trying some different microphone setups here, because microphones are a bit annoying because they're often in your way. I'm gonna get a little cable, I think, so that you have like, you see here, there's a here's like microphone. It comes here. This cable here would be nice if it was a 45-degree angle, so it doesn't point down so much, so it comes up and goes around nicely. That would be nice, because then this is like this annoying space between here where you kind of poke your cable, and if it was a 45-degree angle, then it would be nicer. So I think I'm gonna get something like that. I'm also gonna get a new webcam. Many new things to get. So we need to construct these things. It's essentially a UV position, which is vec2 src.x, src.y, and a UV size, which is vec2 src.width, src.height, and we're gonna divide that. We're gonna make a text size, which is vec2 text.width, text.height, with some f32 casts, because those are integers. Yeah. And then we are going to, what are we going to do now? We are going to, we should do a check up here. So kind of like this. If text.width equals 0, or, well, you could actually text.height is equal, or text.height equals 0, or just return, or if text.id.text equals nil. That way we know it's correct. So then the position in UV space is just this divided by TS and this divided by TS. And then you just do this. You say UP plus, well, this is 0, 0. You just put that into, this is us.x. So it's the, we only take the x part. We sort of see here that we can think of it as we're offsetting it plus giving it the size. I think this is the correct thing to do. plus the whole size. Don't need to put that. I was just being clear to myself. Plus up plus us, and then up plus 0 us dot y. Out with some. Yeah, that still works. But now, if you really wanted to, if we jump to our snake game, have a look-see here. You could, in theory, source, like if you slice this in half, for example, so then you would only draw half the. You see, it works. Now we're drawing the top right of each texture, so that works. And you could also like start 5 pixels in on each, and then -5 here. Well, what happens if we go outside? I think it will be fine. Yeah. You can just do -5 here, and then it will draw a piece of it, not yeah, something like that. Maybe it should be -10. I don't know. Anyways, that's just a little test to see that it's doing roughly what I think it should do. So that means that we have, I think we had that in the readme, maybe not. So we have that fixed. Good. The next thing is that the white background, which I know exactly why it happens, because we have a hack in the shader, right? This was just because I don't. So for those who have used Raylib, in Raylib there is a concept of a, what's it called? A shapes drawing texture. And the reason it uses that is just so it can easily use the same shader and collapse things to the same draw call if you put that shapes texture inside an atlas or something. So you see here, like if you just sample this texture here, which is the bound texture, if you just do that, then if there's no texture bound, you get 0, 0, 0 here, and so then your color will get killed. Which means that I can show you in the other example here. So here we have this is one of the Raylib samples that I have ported over to this little API. And you see this works. If I remove this stuff here, then it's just nothing. And this is because for that whole example is just made out of rectangles. I mean, not this texture thingy, but draw rectangle. This one, you see, this one just has a color, but it doesn't bind a texture. So because of that, it will get 0, 0, 0 every time here, and this is just alpha 0 even, so it will just multiply the color by nothing, which is why I put this little hack in, because I think I need something like a shapes drawing texture. Yeah, that's essentially why Raylib has that. So let's look at that stuff maybe, so we can remove this hack. And that's quite easy to do. We can just, and by the way, this is all sort of, everything in here is currently sort of, how to say, non-abstract. Like there's lots of things maybe I could move out to a platform independent layer, but we're gonna do that when we add another rendering backend, so that we don't do things before we actually need to do them. Right, so in case of this, maybe this would be something that wouldn't be inside the Direct 3D 11 stuff, where I create the shapes drawing texture, rectangle drawing texture. It's Odin, the language. Hello, hell, by the way. I texture iTexture 2D. So we have the texture there. We just need to create it somehow, and it needs to contain some data, of course, but we can just make up some data. We have a, where do we load texture? Load texture from file. This is how we load a texture. Oh, texture and a texture view. Texture view describes how the shader should view it. I'm not sure about exactly how to handle these kind of things. I'm not like currently the texture has the text and the view on it. I'm not sure if you should like create these when you need them, when you bind it and it doesn't have one, or really. I guess this could just, maybe I can just use this method here. Use this blah, 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 procedure. If I do like this. So we load from memory, and then you just make some memory that's just all white. So the point here is that what Raylib does is that it sort of makes a texture, a small texture that's just a block of white, because then it can just sample that using the same shader. And if you then, sure, that maybe, and yeah, it's Odin, and of course then it's HLSL because this is a shader here. I realized that it's not really true. This is Odin here, and this is HLSL. But this is why Raylib uses this texture, because then it can use the same shader. Then if you, it will still break the draw calls if you go from a texture drawing to a rectangle, for example, or a circle or whatever. But if you then just make an atlas where you also put that shapes drawing texture inside the atlas, so you have like a little area of it that is completely white, that you can say that this UV here or this rectangle in here, that's where it is. Then you can actually collapse your texture drawing and your shapes drawing into one draw call. I've talked about this before in some video on my channel, yeah. So we just need to make like white rect is like a U8. How much, how big? 16 times 16 times 4 maybe. Is that good? Is that what I need? I don't know. Then maybe slice.fill. Is that how you do it? Maybe white rect the whole slice and then one value, 255. I think maybe. Then we can just say white rect. So I'm just, let me say 16 by 16. I think that should create a 16 by 16 texture. I'm not sure. Well, that's not how you write anything. Oh, shapes drawing texture. Right. Let's remove this hack here, and now it's everything will broken. And then we go back and we go down to draw rectangle. We can say this. If it's not nil and it's not s.shapesdrawingTexture.id. This whole thing here, the id.text. I'm gonna yeah, we'll see exactly how I do that. later if I change that somehow, maybe, because it's all currently a bit weird. So there you go. Works again. Seriously, it's removed and it works. Guess because now that texture just worked. We can open RenderDoc and have a look-see what it does. Always fun to have a look-see, isn't it? Not a snake game, but 2D camera. Ah, this my backup software. I need to change backup software provider. Okay, here is my program. We can look in RenderDoc. Go into texture view, color pass. So we clear the render target, we clear the depth, and then it draws all the things, and then it draws the. So this is in 2 passes because it first draws. Actually, does the outline even work right now? I'm not sure this actually would work in general, but it draws all these in one draw code because it uses a single texture, and the input you see is just this white texture here. And that's a 16 by 16 texture, RGB 8, sRGB, blah blah blah. Yeah, works. And I managed to guess my texture format like that. Cool. I think this stuff is broken right now. It needs to do the same thing here. It just happens to work because it happens after that other stuff. And this draw rectangle nonsense. Oh, no, wait, it does work. It's just, I'm just being silly. Never mind. It draws rectangles, right? So it just, the outline is actually 4 rectangles. 1 on each side. Hell has never heard of the language before. Well, it's not that big, but it's getting quite popular. And yeah, it's I have lots of videos about it and stuff. Hello, really boys. Funny name. Okay, good. So that little. Oh, there's some. This is also good. I don't know if I showed this last time, but I've enabled all the D3D debug layer stuff. So I get like a little warning or whatever you want to call it when I have unreleased things at the end of the program. So we have a sampler, a texture, and a resource view. The texture and the resource view, we just need to go to shutdown because, I mean, I can just do like this, delete or just destroy texture shape drawing texture. That should fix that. Apparently not. Well, maybe it's. Wait, what's the ref count? Does this one even do anything yet? Aha! Well, there's your problem. Iron's Launch asks, how goes the API? The API goes... I mean, it's pretty much the same, the API currently. I'm just poking around inside the Direct 3D implementation right now. It's going quite okay. So I guess you just do this text.it.text release. Yeah, click that, and then there it released. There's some sampler also that I haven't released. Sampler state, maybe it's that one. So maybe I just need to do like s.sampler state to release or something like that. Yeah, the device will still give an error here because I don't know how you're supposed to do these things in Direct 3D, but if you do this report live objects, which essentially reports anything that still has a positive ref count inside Direct 3D, then to do that you still kind of need you still need some things that depend on the device alive, which will make those, I think so at least. Well, that wouldn't work, but if you did like this, I think it might crash. Well, it still doesn't work because that ref counts on other things like the info queue, and so the device, I don't think you can get out of that list, but that's fine. It's just a device. It's not like a lot of resources and stuff. La la la. Let's see here. So that's good. We got some things fixed. And it's interesting to do this because I know Raylib so well, and then I see like I get to see why Raylib has done some things, like the shapes drawing texture. I understood what it does, but now I see like the exact thing that it sort of solves, that you can use the same shader because you don't need any special case for like, oh, I don't have a texture or I have a texture. Right. Cool. What's next? Let's do a little jitterino here. So we have made my funny 16x16 texture like that. We release it, and we've done our UV for the source rectangle, and we remove this hack. It's all good stuff. So let's look at the README, because in the README is also my to-do. Do proper checks of vertex count and dispatch rendering on full. What happens when list is full? Can we just empty the vertex list due to it being used by the input assembler, etc.? Well, this one is done actually. That's the one we just did. Should we sort by depth? Maybe we should be a vec3. Yeah, this is a bit... I currently have vec2 going into the shader, and I think it's better to have vec3 and sort of fake. Like currently did I disable the depth test or... or something. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, maybe that's something we should think about. So currently, it comes in a position 2 here into the shader, and we have it pads it with a 0, and then blah blah blah. Wait, do I have don't I have depth test on? How does this even work? Is it just, am I just lucky that the order is... Maybe I should use the depth. That's the question. Should I depth sort everything and fake, how to say, when you draw? I think Raylib does this. Raylib doesn't use sort of what's known as a painter's order. Like, you could draw things like first you draw the background and then things forward. Or you could dispatch the draw calls in these are the order they're gonna happen. But I guess maybe if you batch things up, maybe it's not guaranteed that I don't know about these things. Is it guaranteed that... I guess things are drawn in the order they appear in the... Yeah, they are drawn in the order they appear in the vertex buffer. So it should be fine to just not have a depth buffer. Yeah. Oh yeah, no, actually, look at this. Write enabled false. I don't write the depth. I don't even know if I need this stuff currently. Well, it's false here, but does it? Oh well. Oh well. We can sort of have this on the back of our mind. Like maybe we add back the third, so that, you know, if in the vertex, so it's a vec3 here instead, so you can use the depth sorting if you want to. But I'm also not gonna support 3D in this library. But I know some people do 2D games by explicitly depth sorting. Maybe it would be nice to have, like, you can do a vec3 and you can set your projection matrix if you want, but it doesn't have any 3D things. But you can sort of kinda do 3D if you want to, but because that's just how things work, but it doesn't really do anything extra to support that. But yeah, we have this on our back burner. We put it at the bottom of this list. Let's look at the texture things here. I think that's the most interesting stuff. Texture things are a bit of a hack. Make the sampler state configurable. Well, yeah, so we currently have, like, it wraps around the UV. So if you go outside the UV coordinates, it will wrap around, and then the filter is set to something like this. I think the second one here is more interesting. Group set text camera into a section of things that cause a render batch dispatch when changed. So what this means is that set text is also a bad name, but this thing here, maybe draw current batch. That one happens in some different cases. And essentially, I'd like a check, like if we need to draw the current batch. I think this is a bit silly. Let me change something here. Oops. I removed maybe. So draw current batch, it just doesn't do anything if there is nothing in the batch. Right. Could you also hack it to make it work like layers? Yeah, so that's the usual thing you can do with depth buffer. You can draw things out of order, but with us, you can put in a depth yourself to make it work like layers, but actually you're just putting the depth in like that. Anyways, very bright light here. That's better. Right, let's think more about that. Group set takes camera into a section of things that cause a render batch dispatch when changed. So essentially what it means by dispatch is that it draws the current batch when certain things change. But maybe that is unnecessary. Yeah, here's a thing, if anyone is like in the chat is good at rendering programming, that I'm thinking about. We have texture. So our texture currently contains both the texture and the view, which is the shader resource view. So whenever I do load texture from file, load texture from memory, I sort of, the ID here is that texture type thingy. So my texture is currently like this: the width and the height, and then it's the internal state. Which everything is called ID is just nonsense. I need to figure this out, how to do this nicely. So this thing here has the texture and then the shader resource view, because you need to set both when you're about to use it, right? So when you're like draw current batch, then it needs to go like, okay, set, well, it doesn't need to set the texture at all. It just sets the view. The view sort of tells the shader how to look at the texture. So the only thing it sets is the view. So per texture you sort of need to store the view somewhere. I'm just not sure. Currently, whenever I load a texture, I create a view and I store it with it. Yeah. And I'm not sure that's the correct way, if I should create these lazily when needed, so there's like a mapping from each texture to a resource view or something. Because it feels a bit like, okay, I have a texture, and then it creates, and then it contains this view as well. Let's have a little, let me see here. Because I don't think this is a case where, you know, looking at the Raylib source won't help me. I can do like draw texture pro, because this is Raylib uses GL, right? So Raylib will like you run set texture here, and then it will do some stuff here. Well, it enables texture to bind. It binds a texture. I think that's a difference between GL stuff, and you can just bind a texture without a resource view, kind of, right? Yeah, this just returns an ID, and that ID is just, I think that's just the internal texture ID that GL uses. You know, our shader resource view is created by, it's quite simple. You just take the texture and then you take the texture view. I know in like more low level APIs you can have like descriptors and stuff, and you can have like pools of those and more quickly generate them on the fly when needed. But in these kind of Direct 3D, you have like it's a bit more upfront. Shader resource view description. What is this one? I'm passing nil here. I guess you don't need it when you well, that's Direct 3D 12. Optional. Pointer to shader resource view description. Says nil to create a view that accesses the entire resource using. I think you can make it so that it looks at a section of it somehow, like a. Okay. Interesting. Right. So I'm not exactly sure what the best way is here. I could also have my own, lookup. So I store these two things. I don't like that the ID is sort of this. I wanted it just to be some simple number. Now it's like a struct with two items in it. That's why it was called ID, because it was supposed, for example, if you look at Raylib, look at the texture, there's just an ID here, and that's because it's just the texture ID in OpenGL sort of. And I don't want that, but I was thinking if I could just have a simple number like that, and I could just have a sort of handle or index into a array of textures maybe. But yeah. Texture type. Yes, maybe this can just be like integer 2. Or I64, yeah. U64, whatever. And then we could have our internal texture lookup thingy that contains these things. I don't know if that's sort of over engineering it at this point, but I don't like that the API contains this weird stuff. That's my main problem with it. So we have textures, and this will be an array. I'm thinking if I need some kind of handle-based map here or something. Because otherwise, if you have a texture and someone goes and destroys your texture for you, then and it is something else is put in a place, then you can suddenly start using some other texture than you thought you were using. Kind of. Right? This is not gonna be like some map or anything, it's not gonna be like an U64 to a texture, because that's just slow. I just want an array. But then the key here should be sort of somehow the ID here, while we could just use an index, and then we could just have int here instead. While we can do that, I'm not sure it's a good idea, because if you have one texture, your program is using that, and then another part of the program destroys it and puts in a new one in the same. But yeah. Iron says, and it's time to build a resource ID system. Well, kind of, but since I'm not making a generic renderer, I can kind of it doesn't need to be as generic, so I'm just doing what's needed for textures kind of here. Resource ID systems is usually, you can have a textures list, and you can do, there's many different ways, but you could have like an array of textures, and then you can have a free list. And stuff. Since I never I don't think I'll ever get into the situation where I'm using a texture and then it gets destroyed while I'm using it. I'm just thinking if I should just throw my handle-based map. So I have this little library stuff in Odin that sort of solves exactly this. This stuff. This solves these things by mapping an index and a generation to an item somehow. And there's a static growing and a static virtual version. The growing, how does that one work now again? Oh yeah, that's the one that can use. That's the one that uses a dynamic array and an arena. This one is a bit funny. This one allocates with new into the arena, so the things are still sort of quite compact in memory, but it sort of yeah, it does some funny stuff. Yeah, the static one, which uses a static size, so you have a max number of things. You have static virtual, where you also have max number of things, but you can put that number much higher because it uses virtual memory. And then you have the growing version, which uses... I realized maybe there's a missing one in this library. Now that you're gonna use it for something, and you realize that in my case I would actually be fine with a dynamic array, because I don't think in my system that I will destroy a the reason these are like this is because to guard you from destroying something while it's in use. So you, for example, if you fetch a pointer to something, well, that's not gonna save you, but if you have a pointer to something and you add another texture while you're having that one, then it will not invalidate under your feet. That's sort of what it fixes. That's why it has like these different versions, that none of these can end up in a situation where you say get pointer and then you say add, and then the pointer you were holding gets broken. I don't think I'll have that problem here actually. Let's like look at, because it will fetch the texture when it dispatches it, and then you just draw and then done. So with that in mind, maybe what I need, let me look at this one. And back in just let me take this one and modify it a bit. Handle map dot I can make a folder call like that. Handle map. What was this? Yes, handle map dot Odin, and now we just go crazy in here. Just remove these packages, handle map, whatever. Curl to the handle map. We remove that, and we remove this. We need the index and the generation. Maybe we want a bigger index, whatever. Handle map. This does not need to be a pointer. We don't need the arena. The unused items we will need. Blah 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 blah. Make. We don't need all the arena stuff. Items per block. Handle type location. I don't want to use the virtual memory one because I'm thinking maybe I want a web version and you don't have virtual memory there. what does the growing one does here? Oh yeah, that one does sort of uses a let's see here. Let's just do this. Let's do our little own version here. We don't need the allocator error. We can remove that. We just need a handle map returned from here. Arena init, no, don't need that. Items make a blah blah blah. Yeah, so we set it up with the allocator like this. If we want to destroy, then we say arena destroy blah blah blah. Items, unused items. Good, we don't need that. I'm just removing this because these comments will be useless anyways. Add, because that will change things. Hi, I'm just making I need a texture lookup in my 2D rendering library, so I'm just adapting my handle map a bit to this specific use case. Well, I guess this could over here. Let's go back over here. Oh, I actually have some errors here. Res like that. Ugh, like that. The reason it says runtime.make here is just because the word make is in use, because you see I'm inside make here. Items, unused items equals unused items nil. Do like that instead. If not arena initialize, we don't need to do that. If unused items, blah blah blah. Yeah. If there is something in the used items, then we pop it, then we get an index, then we fetch the thing at that index, and then we fetch the generation, and we reused equals v, right, and then it sets the handle and increase generation. This is so that the slot, we know the slot is reused. The same generation plus 1. This should not be a new here, it should just append. This is from the old implementation with the arena. We always have something at index 0, so that you can say like handle with ID and generation 0 is just means nothing. Items allocated, don't need that. New item is just new item is just a copy of v. Then we set the handle on it and we append it, and then we do that. This is like a return situation here, I think. And then this get here sort of fetches that stuff. Remove. Yeah, good. Valid. Iterator. I don't really need iterator, do I? Yeah, maybe. When you look at it like this, okay, we don't need I'll rewrite the handle map for this specific use case because I don't need that one right now. So we'll just do like this instead. But whatever. Let's just go here and say we have texture. It's a dynamic array of textures. Textures free list is a dynamic array of u32 maybe, or int is the integers into that thing, the indices that are free. And then textures gen is a dynamic array of integers or something. Right, and then our texture handle is a struct that has a index. And you don't want these to be too big, so we say u32 and we say generation is u32, which is why this maybe should be u32 and maybe this one too. They can be like that, it's fine. And then you need some way to add to this list. So we're sort of just recreating the handle-based map for this use case here. We're just doing what do we need. Wait a minute. What is a texture even? Because texture is this. We need the internal texture. So it's sort of like, you can call it like that if you want, or but it's sort of like this, right? That's the internal texture. And then I'm just going back and forth. Maybe I should just use this just to get going. Yeah, what the hell? Let's stop messing around. Let's use the... Let's do this. We use this one. Or maybe we can just use this one. So, whatever. It'll be fine. It will be fine. We go up here and we say import handle map. We can give it a little like that, and then we say textures is here hm.handle_map, and we say that we want it to be it is of type texture, and this thing here can just then be a distinct hm.handle. That's a texture handle. And we say that this one is fixed. So we say that we want 10,000 or something of those. That's fine. The only weird thing about my implementation is that you need a handle on here itself, because that's how it works. It compares on the object itself if there's a handle using parametric polymorphism. It doesn't have a separate, like some implementations of this kind of stuff, you would make like a separate list next to it of all the generations. This one instead keeps the handle on each thing and compares it. It makes it a bit simpler to use, but it's each thing gets a bit bigger for. Well, there is a good reason. Like sometimes you have say that you have a texture pointer to it, and then you want to I want to remove this one, and then you want to know the ID of the one you're currently on, and that can be a bit funny sometimes if you don't have maybe you don't even have a pointer, maybe you have a value of it. So that's the reason. Right. This will of course not compile right now. So what we're gonna do now instead is, I think this should be like a U64, I think. Or maybe it could be like a texture handle, whatever that means. It depends. That depends on the implementation. And then we just say text is a texture, like that. Then we say text equals texture view equals texture view. Like I said, I'm not sure. I'm not too good with these things. Like, should the view be in here with the texture, or should I currently create it for each one? Not completely sure what the best way for this, but I think I will note this over time. So you see, now this thing here, will return a handle. So it will add it to the thing and give you back a handle. That one is not needed anymore. And then of course destroy texture should take it needs to do like this. If hm.get s.textures text.id this maybe t is not nil, so you got a pointer to it. Wow. This is what you would use like when you get this kind of handle based map, is what you would probably use when you get like problems with dangling pointers with your in an entity system, for example. But you can use it for other things as well. It just makes it so that you don't store permanent pointers, and it sort of solves the problem of when you're adding to it while it's in you're adding to the array while you have a pointer also. You shouldn't store a pointer permanently, but maybe during a frame, maybe you fetch a pointer and you're holding it, but then you call some other procedure that does some gameplay stuff, and then it's suddenly, for some side effect, it grew the thing, for example your entities array. Like I think I have like a blog post about this. I made a little cute blog post yesterday with this cat. I think maybe I have this whole handle based array. This is handles are the better pointers by Andre Weisflog. It's a sort of a follow-up to that. But so see, I go through all this stuff here. And I talk a bit about entities for video games and how it relates. And then it's the whole discussion about dangling pointers and stuff. But it's a common problem. It's this funny thing, right, where when you come from C++, you would use like, in C++, you would be like entities. Now I'm just writing it in here. This has nothing to do with what I'm doing now. Dynamic entity. You would do like that, and then you would use some your inheritance and separately allocate each of these. Then you realize, oh, that's bad for cache performance. So then you do this, and you maybe don't use inheritance. Like, well, in Odin, there is no very straightforward way of doing inheritance. Like of course you can do that. You can have using and structs and stuff, but whatever. Say that you do this instead, then you're like, okay, now everything is much faster because all the entities are packed one next to the other in the array instead of being separately heap allocated. Like when you do like this, you like a pointer to entity, you probably like new entity add to array, and then they get everywhere in memory. And when you do like this, they be packed. But then instead, when you add to this array, it might get reallocated, and then all the things move to a new location, and then any pointer you had fetched to one of those entities gets invalidated, right? And that means suddenly you can't store you can't use pointers as permanent references anymore. But that's sort of good also that you don't do that, because that's like hard to serialize. It's much nicer if you have some kind of ID, for example. But yeah, that's sort of a side effect of using all the separate heap allocations, is that you can store permanent pointers because they're all separate allocations. In this case, they aren't, so then you would get dangling pointers when this dynamic array grows. So then instead, maybe you start using, instead of using pointers, maybe you start using an index. So which index is my thing? And you make a little wrapper function, and then you realize that, oh wait, something can get deleted at that point and something else can get put in while I have an index to it in some other part of my code. And then you're like, okay, let's add in, and then you get all the way to adding a generation, which is this number on each slot that says how many times has this slot been reused. Then you do that, and then the final thing you will realize is that, but the get procedure here still returns a pointer. So you can, like, inside update player, you might fetch a pointer using a entity handle, and then you have that, but then you run some gameplay code that adds something to the entity array and makes it grow while you had a pointer, and then your pointer is dangling again, even though you thought you had fixed everything. So then you're like, okay, how do I make sure that the array, no pointers get invalidated kind of ever? And then you are like, okay, I can make it into like buckets of, like, I can make the array into separate sections that are fairly big, so you still get good cache performance within each section. You could use virtual memory to reserve a big chunk of things. But then you start getting into, like, what's the best for your application. But it is a funny thing, where it's a funny wormhole where you don't want to separately heap allocate, you remove that, and then it's a sort of this funny can of worms. And I think almost any game developer that has gone from C++, for example, where you maybe would use inheritance and separately heap allocate, well, you don't need to do that in C++, but many people who come from sort of object-oriented C++ would do that. But yeah, it's a funny can of worms where you go down this path of running into separate problems, and then eventually you end up with something like I have here, like they had different handle maps that I tried to create and write about and explain why they are a good idea. Anyways, these entities, I just put that there to explain what all this is. Whatever. we are doing textures. We're not doing entities inside our little 2D thing, of course. That has nothing to do with entities. This will never have a concept of an entity in it. It's not a game engine. What's the problem now? Okay. So, now we have some compilation errors here. This will probably be quite quick to fix. So the set text here, that one will rename later. But let's see here, texture. Okay, let's do that. If the ID of the set texture, so texture is the texture for the current batch. That's what it's for. All right, that's just a texture handle now. Why? Oh yeah, I guess that's fine. Can do like this. Texture none is texture handle none. I can use an empty like that. So if it's not texture none and the ID is not the same, then we draw the current batch. That just means we're changing texture. So then and here we just say ID instead. And then in draw rectangle, we do sort of the same. But it checks directly against the shapes drawing texture, which is, where's the shapes drawing texture? There. Set text is not shapes drawing. All right, like that. We're gonna see it like exactly right now. We have like sometimes we have a texture, sometimes we have a texture handle. I'm gonna look at that, see exactly what it is we want. And here, of course, this is where we get to the thing where we have a handle here and we need to set it. So we do like this. If t equals hm.get the textures set text t is not nil, then you just take t.view here. Yeah, that should work. Well, that one doesn't use any textures, but well, it still seems to work. Interesting. So I guess, yeah, somehow all the code I just wrote just worked. So it adds the texture to an array and then it destroys it and blah blah blah. And this thing up here, shapes, shape drawing texture. This one loads a texture. So it is a bit different here, like load texture is a bit weird because it returns a texture, not a texture handle, because it returns something with width and height. This is actually redundant information right now. Do you use global variables or pointer to state as the argument in function to access program state? Do you mean in general or in this one? I mean, it depends on what you're trying to do. In this case, in this library I'm writing, I use a global state thingy. So you see, that's why you don't need this is some similar to Raylib. There's a global state blob inside here. So otherwise all of these would need a state. But that's just API design. Like, do you want to support multiple contexts sort of or not? So this is my state blob here. This is the whole state for the direct 3D implementation. And there's a global one here. The only thing, special thing I have, because I know that I want hot reload, I have this set internal state so that you can reset it. Everything is inside a state blob, but you can set it like that. And the reason we have that is because since this is global in here, if you do a reload of your gameplay logic, then this global variable might get cleared. Well, you're gonna have to reinitialize it with some data, and then so that's why in init here it initializes. Wait, where does it do that? It makes a new state thing here, a dynamically allocated one, so it just survives reallocations and stuff, and then that's returned, so we can. I use that in some other places, but I think it depends. That's an API design question more than, like, especially if you're making a library. Do you have a state pointer you pass everywhere or not? Well, depends on if it's gonna be like. In this case, I want it to be easy and nice to use, so it's a bit annoying to do that. But if you're doing like something where more a utility library, then maybe you would have a state that you pass everywhere. Right. So that works. I'm gonna go to Snake here. Something I realize I want to do is to enable maybe in this one. Maybe we'll put in some. We'll put in some tracking allocator. I just want to, let's just take the classic one here. Let's put that there. Import core mem, and then we shut down. We'll see if we delete anything. Here's a funny thing you can do. You can do v:\v bytes, and then you flip these two like that. Close it. Wait, is that not? Thought that was. Wait, let me check. And this one. What I was just trying to do was get a error. It can get the error here. Maybe it's like that I need to do. Shut that one down. Yeah. So now it says blah blah, but that's just so we can just do like this instead. So then it says this, then it says send here this line leaked too far, because this will use the same format as the Odin compilation error. So then the Sublime error regex will pick it out when you shut down the program. So you can actually press the jump to symbol and jump to the. I think it's just a neat thing. So you just reverse this like this. So it says a location and how many bytes, and maybe you need something in between. Just in my case, my regget was like that. But yeah, I hadn't compiled this with a funny tracking allocator, so I just thought I'd do that. Vertex buffer CPU. Right. That one is still allocated. Okay, let's go to shutdown and deallocate that. Let's go maybe here. Delete the vertex buffer CPU. Does that one need Snake 2D? Carl 2D. Vertex buffer CPU. That one just makes it. Well, maybe, you know, there are some things here that are not completely correct. Maybe you should do s.allocator equals allocator. Why is there? What does this custom context do even? It's used in the window proc. Right. Well. Maybe I'll remove that later, but the thing here is that this code is actually not correct. So you have the allocator there. When you call make down here, you probably want to pass that same allocator. And then in shutdown, you probably want to delete that thing with s.allocator. That. And then we just have this thing here because we are not, it doesn't free this state yet. That's the only thing it doesn't do, I realize. I think that's how it should be. Here you go. Now it's fine. You might wonder, why don't I do this? Doing it like this can sometimes cause issues, because then if the allocator, wait, does that cause issues in this case? Is the allocator destroyed while it's, does free take it by, I think it's an, maybe it's like an aliasing bug or something. But anyways, if you pass it like that, it might be the same allocator. Like while it's deallocating that memory, it's still using the allocator for some bookkeeping info. And you could essentially destroy that info while you're shutting down. That's why you sometimes need to do this when you store the allocator inside the thing and you're sort of deallocating it at the same time. Wonderpo asks, are there real reasons to release resources on program when you shut down? Only the reason I see is the bug information in like memlink. Well, it depends. If you're just making a game where you init and then you shut down and that only happens once, then you can skip it all. You don't need to, like, returning memory. If you're going to shut down an application, you're correct. You don't need to do that because, you know, it will get torn down anyways. It's nice to do for mem leaks. Maybe you could work around that. But, you know, in this case, there are several things here, right? Yes, it's good for debug information because I don't know everything about DirectX 3D 11. So in order for me to see the real errors, like have I is my code actually buggy and I'm leaking texture handles, then I need to have this list fairly clean. Otherwise it will be a jungle of errors, you know, in this. Like if I just remove all these, you know, and then like, okay, how good, like try finding your texture that, like there was one texture that was actually should have been released. That was like, maybe you have like in your gameplay you have like load texture and then you release it, but it doesn't release properly or something. So for that reason it's good. Oh, did the compilers crash? Okay, sure. But also because there's a library, like if you just make a game and you just have like in your main proc, you just say like, okay, start everything up, and then your game closes. But since this is a library, someone could, you know, run init, shut down, and then run init again. People do that. Like they have a loop that just opens a window and takes a screenshot and then shuts it down and then opens a window and does different things, you know, stuff like that. So in a library, you should expect it to be possible to use in a generic way, which means that you need to tear things down correctly. But if you're making a game yourself where we don't have a library sort of like that, then that's fine. Right, good. Wonder if... Right, good. So at least now the API looks a bit more reasonable. Exactly what happens on the inside is not a huge deal currently, but at least we have some kind of thing like that. The texture handle is of course not defined in the API currently, which is also bad. But I'll think about that. I tried to at some point make the API compiled cleanly without anything actually attached. What do you use for debugging Odin? Any native debugger. You can use the RAD debugger, you can use Visual Studio, you can use what's it called? Visual Studio Code. I usually use RAD debugger. But can use anyone really. Anything that works for, you know, Visual C++ or anything. Anything that works for C++ usually works because it's just a native debugger with the native debugging symbols. You know, in Windows you get a PDB file. That's all you need. Okay, what does the README say? Okay, I'm gonna fix this set text. I hate this name. So we have the batch current texture, batch camera. It's sort of like this, really. That's what it is. Because it's batch texture. It's not texture none. That's what it means. It's which texture should the current batch use. It's not about like which texture is set then. And here we have the camera stuff, batch texture, I think that's it. Then it works. Good, so we have fixed this stuff. Do we need SRV in the texture? I haven't really grouped these things. I was thinking of putting them in a struct, but I think I'm not gonna do that. Texture things are a bit of a hack. Make sampler stick configurable. Do we need SRV in the texture? Don't know. Right. There's still some to-dos here that are a bit technical. It's a technical back burner finkies, but that's all good. Let's see here. At some point, I think some point soon, we will do shader, custom shader load. Oh yeah, shader loading, and that's a can of worms. That's probably the biggest thing, because currently there is an input layout here that's fixed, and we load a shader when we start, and the API has wrapped the Raylib set, the shader stuff from Raylib, but I done it a bit differently with set shader here and stuff. However, I have nothing of that implemented, and I'm not sure I want it like in Raylib. I think in Raylib it's a bit too limited in how you can, like, I think it would be good to have a 2D library where it's easy to set up shaders, but you can still change the vertex input layout if you want to. So you have some kind of description of what the layout of the vertices is somehow. And you, yeah, somehow do that. I'm not sure exactly what it would do, but we'll get to that when we get to that. Because currently, you see, this is just blank, because I haven't. It is just a hard-coded shader right now. So we have that coming up. Let's see. Was there anything more I wanted to do today? I think we're getting close to finish for today. These need to be generalized. Well, whatever. That's in the to do the sampler state configurable. Right. There are some weird things, of course, with sometimes I store a texture handle, sometimes I store a texture. I think that will sort itself out when at some point I think load texture from memory would be an internal procedure that just returns a handle, and then the backend in the backend the backend agnostic code sort of that sort of can run on Direct3D or Vulkan or whatever. That one will create a texture struct that has the width and the height and stuff and the ID. But yeah, we'll see that later. Okay. Well, there was nothing changed. Well, maybe there was. There's just some to do things. There's also a thing here where this used the wrong color space, the whole game. And then at some point we need to do text rendering. We're not sure going to do text rendering like in Raylib. Maybe we'll do some slightly fancier thing by default. But this is the wrong color space. These colors are a bit weird because it has loaded a texture. I think some sRGB kind of stuff. We'll see that. Anyways, did some good stuff here today. That's it for today also. Thank you all so much for watching. I'll see you next time. And if you want to check out this library, then there is a link in the description. If you want to learn more about Odin, then I have a book. There's a URL just above my picture here to where you can read about the book and read a sample of it if you want. And yeah, but thanks for watching. See you next time.